Spirit of truth and love, let there be light. Amen. The house was very difficult to find, even though the woman knew her way around in Tyre. She was desperate and determined to get there. She had heard about Jesus, this remarkable teacher. Even in Tyre, the story had spread about a gathering on a hillside where 5,000 people had been fed with only 5 loaves and 2 fish, and with 12 baskets left over. His reputation as a healer was particularly compelling for her. His confrontations with demons, casting them out and leaving people free and whole. This was just the help her little daughter needed. And the woman, like any parent of a sick child, would not give up on her search for Jesus. Eventually, she found the house where he was staying. He had certainly found a place where he wouldn't be noticed, but her urgency was far stronger than his desire for rest or refuge. She went in. Jesus recognized that she was a Gentile, a Syrophoenician. She placed herself at his mercy and begged for healing for her daughter. His response was quick and sharp. Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. Jesus was prioritizing according to some sense of mission, some notion that the children of Israel must be fed first and then, of course, but later, the others who waited for God's kingdom. He was harsh in calling the people of other nations, and particularly this woman standing in front of him, unclean dogs. But she answered him, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." She was not verbally jousting with Jesus or simply attempting to be clever. She spoke from the depth of her being, from her own experience, from her own culture, where, unlike in Jewish households, the dogs were welcomed inside and allowed to clean up the crumbs. She could picture her own daughter accidentally dropping morsels of food on the floor for the dogs to eat. Did Jesus' second reply to the woman come a bit more slowly? Was there a pause as he looked at her and considered her challenge? Was he somewhere in the back of his mind recalling the vision of Isaiah, a vision of healing, of flowing, life-giving water gushing out for all the nations? Had he prayed the words of the Psalms, praising the Lord who gives justice to those who are oppressed and food to those who hunger, the Lord who loves the stranger? Was there a glimpse of God's kingdom larger than the limited version he had initially offered to this woman? Did her word to him somehow expand his thinking or change his sense of priorities and timing? Was this a moment of transformation? Perhaps his voice was kinder as he answered her, For saying that, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." Of course, the woman hurried home to see if the good news was true. Was her daughter released from the unclean spirit? Was she really well and whole? She found her daughter peaceful, lying on her bed, and the demon was gone. The woman was grateful every day as their lives settled into the new reality of health and calm. She told her daughter about Jesus and about the conversation she had had with him. She sometimes marveled that she had been courageous enough to respond to him the way that she did. It's possible that not long after her daughter's healing, the woman and her daughter heard another amazing story about Jesus. Another great crowd, 4,000 people, and with 7 loaves and a few fish, everyone was fed, and there were 7 baskets of broken pieces left over. The woman would never have imagined that we would hear her story, that her encounter with Jesus would have been kept by the writer of the gospel, that Jesus' harsh answer to her request would ever have been preserved and passed down. Wouldn't it be easier to leave it out? And yet the writer captures her words and gives her voice. One of only 2 places in this gospel where women speak words. We might see this as a pivotal point, a turning point in this story. Jesus now is moving with clarity and urgency toward the Gentiles. He seems to realize that there is already enough for everyone, that he doesn't need to wait to spread the good news to all people, that the kingdom is broad and deep and high enough to include all God's children at once. He has fed 5,000 as he moved among the Jews, and from that remained the 12 baskets of fragments pointing to the 12 tribes of Israel. He has now also fed 4,000 as he travels through Gentile territory, and from that, the leftovers filled 7 baskets, the number 7 signifying wholeness and completeness. The woman's conversation with Jesus serves as a hinge between these 2 feeding stories. Her bold assertion that even the dogs are allowed to eat the crumbs may indeed have impacted Jesus. As followers of Jesus today, we want to pay attention to her story and to her voice. How often do we have a limited view of our mission and our priorities? How often do we act as if God's love is a scarce resource to be conserved rather than a boundless gift to be shared freely? How often do we lose sight of the vastness of God's kingdom and the abundance of God's grace? How easily do we miss the richness of other voices and the reality of other experiences? How easily do we get distracted from the essential work of healing and feeding? How frequently does fear constrict our vision and slow our responses? How far can we wander from the hope and promise of God's reign? Who, like the Syrophoenician woman, will call us back, will remind us of who we are meant to be? What stories will move us toward openness and generosity of spirit? The voices are all around us, the ones who have courage and boldness to speak, and the ones whose lives tell their stories without a word. You know these stories and these voices. Women in Afghanistan suddenly more fearful of what their lives will be like. Parents simply hoping for a healthy, safe beginning to school for their children. Undocumented families afraid to bring a child to the doctor or the emergency room. Women in Texas. Women who pray every night that their Black sons and daughters will come home safely at the end of the day. There are many, many versions of this voice and many, many stories, all of them urging us to live with our minds and our ears and our hearts open to hear, and with our hands open to heal, to feed, and to serve, to let go and release God's love fully and completely into the world in the abundance of God's grace. Amen.